In Spain, Manel and his wife Julia are driving home in their car. Julia brings up the topic of having children because Manel hasn't decided yet, and she needs an answer to plan their future. They get into an argument and both become distracted, forcing Julia to quickly maneuver the car to avoid an oncoming vehicle. Unfortunately, their car ends up stranded in the middle of the road and is suddenly struck by a large truck, causing the car to roll over. A year later, widower Manel lives alone with his cat. On TV, reporters discuss the UN's consideration of closing borders due to a mysterious virus spreading. Preventative measures are failing, and people are becoming violent at the borders while trying to escape. Manel is so depressed that he barely pays attention and eventually turns off the TV. He misses a hospital security footage showing a patient gradually turning into a zombie. Later, Manel goes for a drive and notices an ambulance passing by. Various walls around town are covered with graffiti proclaiming the end is near. Manel arrives at the harbor to meet two women interested in buying his boat, which he hasn't used since his wife's death. While searching for the boat's documents, Manel finds Julia's bracelet, flooding his mind with bittersweet memories. On his way home, Manel receives a call from his sister but chooses to ignore it. He stops at the supermarket for groceries and observes that everyone is buying significantly more food than usual, nearly emptying the shelves. Back home, Manel ties the bracelet around his cat's neck while watching the news that the virus has now appeared in Spain. In the evening, Manel video calls his sister Belen, who has significant news. Since her husband works for the government, her family is being relocated to the Canary Islands, and she invites him to join them, but Manel declines. The next day, Manel notices all his neighbors are leaving, so he decides to do the same, bringing his cat along. During the drive, he hears on the radio that a new variant of the virus is spreading across Europe. This strain shortens the incubation period to just a few minutes and is transmitted through wounds and bites. At the airport, Manel sends Belen a message saying he will join her after all. As people attempt to board the plane, tickets are denied without explanation, and the crowd becomes agitated, yelling at an employee who is clueless about the situation. Suddenly, the large screen announces that all flights are cancelled, and everyone receives a civil security alert on their phones. Panic ensues, and some people try to force their way onto the plane. Manel receives a call from Belen, instructing him to hide at home and stay put until more information is available. At that moment, a man steals a gun from the guards and threatens to shoot, causing the crowd to rush out of the airport. Since everyone is trying to return home, Manel gets stuck in traffic, and the radio reports that all roads and bridges are in the same chaotic state. As military helicopters fly overhead, people start abandoning their cars and arguing with other drivers. News reports reveal that military personnel have been evacuated, and riots have broken out, resulting in many soldiers being injured. Eventually, many drivers grow tired of waiting, abandon their cars, and leave on foot. Manel grabs his cat and decides to do the same. He arrives in his neighborhood at night and discovers that a group of soldiers has surrounded a building to set up a special tunnel in a house. Strange noises emanate from it, and Manel is shocked to see two soldiers bringing a zombie out of the house through the tunnel while a wife cries for her sick husband outside. The zombie is taken away in a military vehicle, and Manel realizes he knew the man. Afterwards, Manel returns home and falls asleep. That night, he dreams about the accident and Julia's death. The next morning, Belen video calls Manel to inform him that they are organizing safe zones to redistribute the population. However, there are disagreements within the army because taking more people increases the risk of introducing the virus into the safe zones, and other countries have already struggled with similar efforts. She advises Manel to stay home no matter what. Soon, all major cities declare quarantines and refuse to allow anyone to seek refuge, causing even more riots on the streets. The virus is no longer contained, and people start seeing zombies attacking others in their neighborhoods, which they record for social media. Others create videos sharing ideas on how to build armor and defend themselves. That afternoon, the government announces a state of emergency and implements new restrictions. All commercial activities must cease after 2 p.m., and the population may be militarized. The next time Manel goes to the supermarket, there is almost no food left, and people begin stealing from each other. Manel grabs what he can and sees fighter jets flying overhead. He stops at a gas station for more supplies. At that moment, a wounded police officer appears and, after bumping into Manel, locks himself inside the station store, securing the doors with his handcuffs. Soon, more people arrive, running and crying out for help. Suddenly, a zombie attacks another officer, starting to eat his face. Manel grabs a mop to defend himself, but as the zombie approaches, the fallen officer shoots it, causing zombie blood to splash on Manel's face. Inside the store, the first cop pounds on the glass as he begins to transform. Worried, Manel wants to check on the injured officer, who shoots the floor to keep him at bay. After Manel leaves with his belongings, the cop self-deletes. Later that day, the president appears on TV to announce an extended lockdown. People who fail to cooperate with the army and evacuation plans will face criminal consequences. Following online tutorials, Manel uses his tools to reinforce his house's outer walls and installs a security camera. In the evening, the army arrives at Manel's neighborhood to evacuate it, but Belen sends him a message telling him to stay home and that she'll rescue him soon. Manel turns off the lights and hides with his cat while hearing soldiers pounding on his door. Thankfully, they don't break in or see him through the window, so they leave. 2 weeks later, Manel starts running out of food and can't call his sister anymore because the service is down. After much hesitation, he grabs a set of self-defense tools, covers his body with layers, and finally leaves his home. He breaks into multiple houses looking for food but finds nothing. After a few hours of searching, he enters a house and meets an elderly woman named Gabriella, who couldn't join the evacuation because she's wheelchair-bound. She also lacks food but tells him which houses might have supplies since she observed neighbors who bought too much before the lockdown. Manel visits every house on her list and finally starts finding food and other useful items, including a bike. Thanks to the bike, Manel dares to travel further and manages to gather a good amount of food, which he shares with Gabriella. He also gives her a walkie-talkie so they can communicate while he's out. Now, there's only one house left to visit, the one where the soldiers found the zombie. Manel finds no food there, but there's a tank with dead fish inside. Suddenly, he senses someone behind him and quickly opens fire, thinking it's a zombie. It's actually a normal person who immediately runs away, thinking Manel is aggressive. Before leaving, he checks one final cupboard and finally finds more food. Days pass, and Manel and Gabriella often meet to dine together. One night, Manel gets drunk and sends Gabriella a message expressing his regret for not spending more time with his family. He then dreams about the accident again, remembering how they were taken to the hospital in a helicopter. He is suddenly startled awake by Gabriella on the walkie-talkie, telling him to turn on the radio. Manel does so and hears a voice saying they're sending survivors to the Canaries, sharing coordinates for people to find this rescue group. Gabriella doesn't trust them, but Manel points out they're running out of food. The group appears to be at the Arousa estuary, and Manel suggests they could reach it using his boat. Gabriella claims she can't go because she'd be a burden. Manel refuses to listen and promises to take care of her. The next morning, Manel gets worried when Gabriella doesn't answer his calls. He runs to check on her and discovers she has self-deleted. She left a note thanking him for the past few days and telling him to save himself. On his way back, Manel is suddenly attacked by a zombie, who manages to disarm him. After a struggle, Manel kicks the zombie off and jumps onto a car, only for the zombie to grab his leg to pull him down. The struggle continues as the zombie bites Manel's arm. Thankfully, it doesn't pierce his skin due to his protection, although the creature spits blood on his face. Manel reaches out to open the car door and starts beating the zombie with it, getting her head stuck in the broken glass. He then retrieves his weapon and shoots to kill the zombie just as she frees herself. Afterwards, he grabs her ID from her wallet and places it on her chest in case the authorities find her. Later at home, he boils water to clean his weapon and sends Belen another message saying he can't wait for her anymore, but there's still no service. Manel then leaves with his cat on the bike, riding at high speed through the empty roads. Eventually, he encounters a barrier, forcing him to go through the forest. There, he's chased by zombies who aren't fast enough to catch him. Sometimes they try to jump, so Manel has to stay alert to dodge them. When he comes across an abandoned camp, he fears what he might find there but has no other exit. He begins crossing it, and a large horde of zombie campers emerges, causing Manel to speed up to dodge them all and avoid crashing into any equipment. He manages to cross the area without getting bitten and reaches another road, only to find a pile of bodies blocking it. Manel is going too fast to stop in time and ends up falling off the bike. Thankfully, the cat is safe in his crate. Hearing the approaching zombies, Manel gets back on the bike, but it won't start, so he has no choice but to run. He crosses the forest as quickly as possible with the zombies almost breathing down his back. Eventually, he makes it to the harbor and, as he crosses the bridge, he closes the gate behind him. The zombies soon start pounding on the glass until they break it and cross as well, but by then Manel has passed through a stronger gate and finally escapes. At first, Manel thinks hope is lost because he discovers all the boats are gone from the harbor. However, after looking around, he finds an abandoned boat far out in the water. Manel swims to it and tests the engine, but the boat won't start. At that moment, he hears a noise and opens a door to find a zombie baby stuck on a chair. Afterwards, Manel and his cat leave on a small raft. He tries to reach the location from the radio message, but it's destroyed. No matter how far he goes from the shore, he still has no signal, but he keeps recording messages for his sister. That night, the raft stops in the middle of the trip. When Manel checks the engine, he discovers a body has gotten stuck in it. At that moment, he sees a bright light approaching, and Manel waves his arms while yelling for help. It turns out to be a boat with Ukrainian men who agree to let him join them. Manel and the cat are taken to a large ship and given food. The only man who can speak Spanish is Victor, who explains the Canaries have been quarantined and the police didn't allow the evacuated survivors to disembark, which is why there are so many zombies on land. Manel is assigned a room after promising he'll help them look for supplies in the morning. In the middle of the night, Manel hears some voices and looks out the window to find some survivors on a boat asking for help. The next morning, Manel asks about the new survivors, but Victor swears nobody came last night. Then, Manel is called to the captain's office to help identify important buildings on the map, such as hospitals and factories. Later, he discovers that the boat he saw last night is on the ship and the crew has the survivors' possessions. He asks Victor about it, but Victor refuses to answer. Since Victor is a pilot, Manel tells him he knows where to find a helicopter, but Victor advises him to stay quiet and stop asking questions. In the evening, Manel looks around and notices the ship is carrying all the boats the crew took from random survivors. He gathers his things and hides his cat in his bag to sneak around the ship. In a room downstairs, he finds two survivors tied up. Manel quickly frees the first man, but as soon as he stands up, a guard shoots him down. At that moment, Victor also arrives and tries to disarm the guard, so they fight over the gun and accidentally shoot it, damaging nearby items. The men start punching each other, and Victor manages to grab a rope to choke the guard to death. Now, Victor wants to escape too and agrees to find the helicopter. Manel, Victor, and the other survivor carefully sneak around until they reach a boat. As they're about to leave, two guards open fire, killing the survivor. As the boat takes off, Victor fires back but gets wounded on his shoulder. Manel accelerates the boat to escape before they can be killed. Moments later, they reach the shore, and Manel helps Victor walk. They find several cars with zombies stuck inside, which Manel quickly kills. Afterwards, both men and the cat leave in a car to find the hospital where Julia died because Manel remembers the helicopter. During the trip, Victor explains that the ship's captain was a monster who was building a refuge on an island. He only allowed those who served him to live there, so all the women and children were taken for his pleasure. When they finally reach the hospital, Manel is devastated to see the helicopter is not on the roof. Suddenly, a zombie jumps onto the car, so Manel starts driving wildly to throw it off. He then uses Victor's gun to kill it, and the noise attracts even more zombies, whom Manel quickly shoots down as well. Afterwards, the men and the cat enter the hospital, and Manel searches for a tool to remove the bullet from Victor's shoulder. At that moment, he hears voices coming from the first floor, so Manel goes upstairs. He sees a zombie walking by and hides before he can be seen. Then he hears the voices coming from the vents, so he talks to them until another zombie appears behind him. Manel quickly pushes the zombie off and shoots it down, only for more zombies to burst through the doors. He immediately runs back to the initial room and ensures the doors are locked to keep the zombies out. To Manel's surprise, Victor and the cat aren't where he left them. When he turns around, a chute opens, and Lucia tells him to join her. The duo closes the chute and escapes just before the zombies break down the other doors. Manel is taken to an infirmary where Nurse Lucia and Sister Cecilia have Victor, the cat, and 3 children. The women tend to Victor's wound and stabilize him. When Manel mentions the helicopter, Lucia reveals it's parked behind the hospital in the quarantine area, which is full of zombies. That night, the group shares their limited food with Manel, who keeps thinking about his wife. He goes to the room where she died and remembers their last moments together. He also takes the bracelet from the cat and ties it to Julia's bed. The next morning, Manel goes to the roof to watch the zombies and suddenly his phone gets signal, allowing him to receive all the messages Belen sent him over the past few weeks. While Manel records a response, he hears gunfire and looks out to discover the ship crew is killing zombies to enter the hospital. Manel rushes to warn the group about the impending danger, so they decide to try using the hospital basement to reach the helicopter. The basement is filled with bodies and smoke, so everyone covers their mouths and noses as they move. Unfortunately, the door is stuck, and they have to hit it with an axe to open it. A zombie emerges and tackles Cecilia to bite her. Manel pulls him away and burns his face against a hot pipe before Lucia kills him with the axe. Now infected, Cecilia tells them to proceed without her and leaves. The group reaches a corridor and finds some zombies behind furniture. Lucia manages to open the door quietly, but a child speaks when she sees her mother as one of the zombies. Thankfully, they aren't hurt and proceed to walk to the door, only for a zombie to suddenly push down some shelves. The noise alerts the other creatures, so Manel hides with the child inside a cabinet while the others get behind the door. The zombies start pounding on the cabinet, and for a second, it seems it's over for Manel. However, the ship crew arrives and shoots all the zombies down within minutes. After a brief argument, they leave without seeing anyone. Now, the group can finally reach the last door, but they see all the zombies outside. Remembering the tutorial from the internet, Manel ties a bunch of cages together and they use them as a shield to cross the yard. At first, it goes smoothly, but when a wheel gets stuck, the noise attracts the zombies. Lucia uses her axe, and Manel uses a fire extinguisher to keep them at bay while Victor continues to push the cages. They move very slowly, but with much effort, they make it to the gate. Lucia breaks the chain with her axe and stays with Manel to fend off the zombies while Victor runs with the kids to the helicopter. After much pushing, Lucia and Manel manage to close and lock the gate with a scarf, then they run to join the others. Victor tries starting the helicopter, but it doesn't work, and the zombies begin to climb over the fence, so Manel goes out to fight them. At that moment, Victor finds an unplugged cable and reconnects it, finally making the helicopter operational. The sound of the engine attracts the crew, who arrive at the yard and start shooting zombies. They cut the scarf to open the gate and threaten to shoot the group if they don't comply. Victor carefully nods to Manel, who breaks another chain to open a second gate. A new horde of zombies rushes into the yard and quickly surrounds the crew, biting them. A few zombies also approach the helicopter, so Victor makes it hover to push them off. Manel fights his way through the horde, killing zombies with the axe. The helicopter is about to take off, but once all the zombies are down, Lucia throws a ladder, and Manel immediately climbs it to reunite with his new friends and his cat. A few hours later, the helicopter is nearing the Canaries. At that moment, Manel receives a call from Belen telling him not to come. 2 fighter jets fly by, confirming the islands are infected as well.